What's in a name? In English, most would say pronunciation. It is considered important and respectful to ask, did I pronounce that correctly? In fact, it's hard to even think about something else mattering. Knowing the etymology of a name is interesting, but it doesn't really change what we call someone. For example, the common name Peter is derived from the Greek Petros, meaning stone or rock. In French, it becomes Pierre, and Spanish, Pedro. We think of these as different names, and the fact that they share the same root is just fun trivia. If someone introduces themselves as Pedro in English, you would have to be absolutely deranged to call them Peter or Petros. However, doing something equivalent is actually the social standard between some languages of East Asia. This video will focus on the translation of names between 3 East Asian languages: Japanese, Korean, and Mandarin Chinese. Vietnamese also has significant Sinic influence, but will be left out of this video for the sake of time. I encourage you to explore the connection on your own, though. I will start with the basics of the writing and reading systems for each of these languages. Then, in the main focus of this video, I'll examine a plethora of cases and all the incredible and sometimes puzzling things that will happen when translating names between them. First, a primer on how these 3 languages work. There are timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead, but this can help someone with no background understand the rest of the video. I'm going to start with Japanese. It's the most complicated, but it will guide our understanding later. Japanese has 4 writing systems: hiragana, katakana, kanji, and romaji. We are particularly interested in 2 of these. Kanji is based on Chinese ideograms. They often have multiple pronunciations and, like the Chinese characters on which they are based, refer to distinct concepts. Importantly, usually only one of these pronunciations is phonetically derived from the Chinese reading, and the rest come from Japanese pronunciations for the same concept from the native Japanese language. For example, mountain is pronounced shan in Chinese. In Japanese, the most common pronunciations are san, derived from the Chinese, and yama, which is the native reading. So the same character, same concept, but slightly different pronunciation, usually including extra native pronunciations that differ significantly. The second writing system of interest is katakana, mostly used for writing foreign words. This is a phonetic writing system. For example, terebi means television. Each character only has a sound and no meaning of its own. Even though most katakana is used for loan words familiar to us in English, it is used for all foreign words. For example, the capital of South Korea, Seoul, is written as Soru. Next, Korean. It is comparatively simple as it is written in a single phonetic writing system called Hangul. The phonetic letters are combined into blocks which correspond to words. Many Hangul words originate from a Chinese character, which imparts its meaning and sometimes its sound, but not the appearance. There is no separate system for writing foreign words in Korean because the writing system is already phonetic. So, like with katakana, foreign words are written with the Korean Hangul characters that best approximate the sound of the word. Lastly, Chinese is written with Chinese characters essentially exclusively. There is no separate system for writing foreign words. This is a bit strange. Foreign words are written using Chinese characters strung together, but they lose their meaning and keep only their phonetic component. Chinese readers just have to know contextually that Yazhou means Asia, Asian continent, and that Ya-se is the English name Arthur, not Asian harp, which is the actual meaning of each character individually. Okay, on to the actual point of this video. I will now go over a number of interesting things that happen when names are translated and transcribed between Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. First, between Chinese and Japanese. It is not straightforward and what originally motivated this video. Japanese names are usually written with Chinese characters and read using native Japanese pronunciations. In Chinese, these characters are then read one by one with the Chinese reading. This results in a pronunciation completely unlike what the Japanese person calls themselves. So the name of the Prime Minister of Japan, Suga Yoshihide, is pronounced by Chinese speakers as
日本新一任自民党总裁菅义伟.
Jian Yiwei. This is really weird. It's not self-identity or representation that matters most, but the product of a shared cultural heritage going back thousands of years. In the other direction, Japanese similarly tends to read Chinese names using their own sounds for the Chinese characters. However, Japanese has pronunciations for kanji with Chinese roots, so usually the basic consonants are approximated a lot better. For example, the President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, has a name read in Japanese as
中国の習近平国家主席は
Xu Qingpei. Let's think about what this means. When a Chinese and a Japanese politician meet, the normal way of doing things is for each to call the other to their face by a name that the other never uses to introduce themselves or might not have even heard until going to the other country. This is not the only way of doing things, but is what we see at the top diplomatic levels, which would naturally be influential. For individuals, there are a plethora of approaches. In a survey of about 400 Chinese foreign exchange students at a Japanese university, there were 24 distinct combinations of ways that students wrote their names to indicate how they wanted to be represented and addressed. How about Korean names to and from Chinese? The Korean approach, as always, is to create a best approximation for the name someone calls themselves with Korean sounds. Xi Jinping becomes
시진핑 중국 국가
Xi Jinping. The reverse case is much more complicated. A majority of Korean words, and basically all of those found in names, are derived from Chinese characters. This is not immediately present in writing, but it is made obvious in Chinese, which simply writes Korean names with the underlying Chinese characters. The Chinese pronunciation is then simply reading each character in Chinese. Generally, it turns out sounding similar to the Korean pronunciation. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is written and pronounced as
文在寅，也就是共同民主党的总统。
Wen Zai-yin. North Korean Supreme Leader, that's his official title, Kim Jong-un is written and pronounced as Jin Zheng-eng. Notice that he has the extremely common Korean surname Kim, which turns out to be derived from the Chinese character for gold, Jin. Finally, the bilateral transliteration between Korea and Japan is straightforward to utilize but more complicated historically. Each language has a phonetic writing system, and the agreement is to try and emulate an individual's self-pronunciation. Suga Yoshihide in Korea is known as
스가 요시히데 관방장관이
Suga Yoshihide. The Japanese write the Korean name in katakana, since it is a foreign name, and provide the kanji representation as well.
韓国のムン・ジェイン大統領は
Moon Jae-in. For a long time, however, the social standard in Japan was to use the Japanese reading for the Chinese characters of Korean names. Under this model, Moon Jae-in would have been called Moon Zai-in. This was particularly controversial with the Zainichi Korean population. These are ethnic Koreans permanently residing in Japan. There's a significant Chinese population in Japan as well, but the Japanese-Korean case is particularly acute. Korea was annexed by the Japanese Empire in 1910, and in the 1930s, an aggressive assimilatory policy began as Koreans were forced to adopt Japanese names and forbidden from using or teaching the Korean language. Even in the post-war era, official Japanese news networks refused to pronounce Korean names as their owners preferred up until as recently as the early 1980s. A breaking point occurred in 1987 when Pak Sil, an ethnic Korean born in Kyoto, won a lawsuit to be officially identified with the Korean pronunciation of his name, which became the standard across Japan. That's the most common cases of how names are translated. Here's another example to show how naming is something constantly evolving with society over time. It deals with Japanese and Western languages. This was a big surprise to me. Katakana is how Japanese deals with foreign names. How about literature Nobel laureate Kazuo Ishiguro, who is Japanese and was born in Japan but grew up in and lives in the United Kingdom and writes in English? The Japanese version of his book actually emphasizes his name in katakana even though he has a Japanese name. This is a really neat situation where his name was given in Japanese kanji, transliterated into English where it became established as his identity, requiring it to be then transliterated back into katakana for the Japanese. That's all the content that I have prepared. I'm going to keep learning about this fascinating topic, and I encourage all of you to do the same. If you have any questions or just enjoyed this video, please leave a comment. Thank you.